My guest today on Remarkable Regional Business is Kyle Racki, the founder and CEO of Proposify. Kyle is a first for this podcast. Kyle hails from a little place called Halifax, and you think, where in Australia is that? Well, it's not in Australia. It is in Nova Scotia, Canada. And Kyle runs a software-based company, an online tool called Proposify. And so he is our first regionally based international guest. He runs a wonderful team, which is quite a substantial team. But the tool he uses is amazing. And his journey is one of identifying a problem in his market and then going about solving that. And to do that, he had to build a SaaS company. So enjoy this episode. I really did. So let's take it away. Kyle, mate, thanks so much for joining me in the virtual studio. I cannot wait to dive into everything about your business journey and about Proposify. I'm really excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me, Caleb. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's very cool. Now, I will have introduced you as our first ever international guest on this podcast, right? So most of our guests are all across Australia. I have had a few from Tasmania, which is an island off the bottom of Australia. So it's
I'm aware,
I like to call it overseas, but it's still Australia. I'm really keen to dive in. Let's start with Proposify, the wonderful company that you've built. Just lay it out for us. What is Proposify for those who have never heard about it? And what does it look like from an operations and company perspective?
Yeah, so Proposify, we've been in business now for 10 years. We celebrated our 10th anniversary last summer. And basically Proposify is for companies that send out visual proposals to their clients. So we work with a lot of marketing agencies and video marketing agencies, but also a lot of kind of blue collar businesses, landscapers, cleaning, janitorial companies, those kind of things. So basically what we help with particularly sales teams is that when they're using Google Docs or Word or all these different disparate tools, there's a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of errors that go out, and also just a lack of visibility. People kind of don't know, did their client get it? Did they open it? And so we provide that visibility, that control, and just make a better buying experience for your B2B end buyer. Yeah,
that's right. I love that. The bit of context for how we know each other. I've been a Proposify user for about 4 years, I think. And when I started using Proposify, what I was doing beforehand was designing a proposal in InDesign, and I'm not good at InDesign, and it'd take me forever, right? Like I'd be, I was spending
InDesign
a lot of time.
Is a complex tool,
It is
for
a
non-designers.
complex tool. Yeah, that's
Sometimes
right.
even
And
for
I'm
designers.
not a designer. Yeah. And so it was taking me a long time. And then I was having to download it as a PDF and then use Adobe Sign to get a digital signature. And I thought I was being super clever. And then I thought, man, there's got to be a better way than doing this because it takes so long. I can't embed videos in the proposal. It's clunky. I have to use two different tools. Surely someone's come up with a better way. And it didn't take any Googling at all and to find Proposify, which was, front and center, and the solution that seemed to be the most fit for purpose for my needs. It's been a wonderful journey of using Proposify over the last 4 years, and to have that data and stuff. And we'll dig into a bit of the cool elements of the product, but also how you've built the business. But I just wanted to give that kind of context of that's our journey. And then I reached out to you, maybe was it last year, to see if we could team up for some business coaching that I've been doing. And and develop a bit of a course there. So
I first
audience
heard,
background knowledge.
I first heard your voice and saw you actually in our customer support Slack channel. Somebody on our support team said, "Hey, this customer wrote in, wants to talk about partnerships and whatnot." And I saw that in there. I was like, I'll reach out to him.
That's so good. That's right. I often say the Proposify support team is the best one, the best support team I've dealt with anywhere for any size company of anything. Like, I don't know how you do it, man. I might dive into that as well, because those guys are absolute legends, and they have saved my bacon multiple times. And so naturally, when I wanted to like get something, get onto you or like propose an idea, I just sent it to the support team, and then it got to where it needed to go. That's pretty cool.
They're good. Yeah, we'll definitely dive into some of those support principles that we adhere to.
I love it. So let's just lay a bit of the company foundation of Proposify. What does the operation look like, and what kind of team goes behind building and managing and running a SaaS product like this?
We're about 65 people. We're all mostly based in Canada, and that's more for hiring, more for logistic reasons than anything else. We're not set up to hire internationally, but we do have a member of our support team, Andre, who you've probably interacted with because
I have.
Is based in the Philippines. And so he's a contractor, but he's a full-time contractor who runs support in the Philippines. And it's really as a way to help. We have a lot of Australian customers, and we hated in the past not being able to offer quick support to them, having to wait the 12 to 24 hours to get a support answer. So we got Andre in. He works that region, that time zone, and that way we're able to cover a lot of time zones. So about 65 people. We, like I said, mostly based out of Canada. Been around 10 years. We were in person, and then we went remote during COVID. So that's kind of actually helped us expand our reach across Canada. I'm from a very relatively small part of Canada called Nova Scotia, smaller population and whatnot. So when we went remote, it enabled us to hire people from places like Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, bigger cities in Canada that had a lot more, especially engineering talent.
Yeah. That's actually how you've qualified to be on this podcast, right? Is from being from Nova Scotia. This is a regional business podcast, and we interview legendary founders and CEOs of remarkable regional businesses. When I saw you were based in Nova Scotia, I was like, I could ask Kyle if he wanted to come on. So that's really cool. Have you always been based there, and what have been some of the challenges of growing a software company from a regional area in Canada?
Yeah, so if most people listening to this are from Australia, presumably, they may not kind of know and don't need to necessarily know the geography of Canada, but it's like Australia. It's a very big country with a relatively small population. So, you've got the West Coast, Vancouver, Calgary, and, the Prairie provinces in the middle. You've got Toronto, Montreal, which are like kind of the bigger, well-known cities. And then way off on the East Coast, you've got all the Atlantic provinces. And we're the bigger city on the East Coast, but still relatively small. So I actually was born and partially raised on the West Coast. And then my parents moved to the East Coast when I was young. So I've been here most of my life. And then I think, part of why I'm so grateful to run a business like Proposify is that it's enabled me to travel and to, see bigger cities and see a lot of places in the US and in Europe and that kind of thing to give me more exposure. And I think if anything, it's helped me appreciate where I'm from more, because in Nova Scotia, like, it's a modern city, but it's very close to nature. I have a lake in my backyard. You're never far from the ocean. Very big surf culture where I'm from as well. Boating culture, that kind of thing. So all that to say, there are challenges with it being a smaller, developing city in terms of, like, especially in the tech scene. There's not a lot of tech companies, not as much Certainly building a business that is dependent on local clientele is not a good idea. And that was my first business when I ran an agency business. We pretty much depended 100% on people. Like our customers were local businesses and government organizations, and it was really, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's just continue on that track. We'll get to all of what makes Proposify great and unique, and what's coming up in the future. But we're here at your origin story, so let's continue on with that. Tell me, how did you start Proposify? What were you doing, and how did you grow it to where it is now?
So I started my career as a designer. Actually, I worked in small marketing advertising agencies. That was where I learned InDesign and started doing proposals for the agencies that I was a part of. And it was actually as far back as then, so kind of think mid 2000s, that I started to think, man, there should be like a tool for this that should make them look really great, but easy to edit and all in the browser and all that kind of stuff. So that was sort of the seed of the idea. But before I really had the kahunas to start a SaaS business, I was a freelance web designer. And that was the business that I started. I had somebody I worked with named Kevin at agencies who was kind of more the biz dev sales guy. Very much, I think, in a similar way to your, one of your business partners is sort of like a business mentor who's a little bit older. Yeah. He and I partnered up, started an agency together where we're mainly doing websites with a little bit of like ad campaign, SEO kind of stuff as well. So that was kind of that was my first foray into like running a business and hiring employees and all that kind of stuff. And we ran that for 5 years while we sort of started to tinker with Proposify and what would eventually become Proposify. Eventually we were able to offload the business to someone else, raise a little bit of money for Proposify and go full time into it.
Love that. And so what was the earliest iteration of Proposify, and how did it look different to what it is now?
Well, after this, if you like, I can send you, I think I still have it on YouTube, like an old demo video from like 2012, I want to say.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's just, it looks so bad. But I mean, the idea is there, right? Like,
yeah.
It was something like we tinker with a lot of SaaS ideas when we were running the agency. It's probably why we were so unprofitable and like always trying to chase dollars down to pay our rent and stuff. But we tried a whole bunch of different ideas, and it was like I kept coming back to the proposal idea. And I ended up doing like a startup event, like a local regional type of thing where you pitch your startup idea. And I had this kind of semi-working version of Proposify, which was called Pitch Perfect at the time. And really our corporation was called Pitch Perfect right up until only a few years ago when we reincorporated. Right. We called it Proposify Inc. So yeah, those are kind of the roots and the background of the product. But really it was just the response I was getting was like when I would talk about proposals and making that easier, I would always get a positive reception, or people would always say like, oh yeah, I write proposals, man, it really sucks. I wish there was an easier way. So that was kind of what fueled me to want to keep going and keep exploring the idea, even though there was plenty of other people telling me this is a stupid idea, this will never work.
Yeah, there's always those people, right? Tell me, what was the journey from there to here, and what was some of the wins and the challenges along the way of growing from that seed funding stage to a 65-person team?
It was a roller coaster. So when we kind of, Kevin and I left the business behind that we were running that was essentially feeding ourselves and nothing more. We had a small amount of money to play with. We had one developer who we had hired, and it was just 3 of us kind of against the world. Basically no customers, like maybe 5 people at any given time using the tool. And, we couldn't keep anybody in the product for very long either. So we were like, we basically had, as I liken it, the train was barreling behind us while we were laying down the track. So we were like, we have like 10 months of money in the bank in order to like turn this into something. And I wasn't sure it would happen. But, at a certain point, it was around 2014 would have been the timeline where we made some changes to the product. We added e-signatures, we added like metrics, we added templates so you could kind of get started up and running faster. And it's just like it was weird. Something clicked like overnight, it felt, because we went from basically having no revenue to like maybe $1,000 in MRR, recurring revenue. And then it would just keep doubling every month after that. So It started to grow really, really quickly. And that was where we knew we had something. We started to hire people because we now had more revenue coming in. So that early kind of like growth stage was really exciting. And that was probably that was the most fun I think we had. And when things that were the most fun, it was like that. And then I would say, and we can get into the details if you like, but like at a certain point, we decided to raise money from outside investors and just try to scale up more. And we actually were bigger than we are today. At one point, we were 110, I think. But the revenue didn't grow as quickly as we were adding headcount and expenses and that sort of thing. So we decided, around 2022 to scale down, to do, a layoff, reduce the team size. And I think that was a painful but necessary evolution in the company. And where we've been at the last few years is, we're playing catch up with the market. When through the course of growing really quickly and adding a lot of people, we also added a lot of cultural debt, a lot of technical debt. It became much harder to move quickly. And so where we were, on par with our competitors, they quickly outpaced us, and we became kind of stuck in like we couldn't change our product and we couldn't add a lot of features and we couldn't fix certain things. It became very hard to evolve. And so it started to take its toll on the business and on the culture and on the, the mindset. So we've been kind of, it's a weird, like there was sort of the really positive, fun early stage. There was like the raise money growth, add headcount, but like performance not quite there. And then we're like in the third phase of the company now, which was almost like tearing down and rebuilding it.
Yeah. Wow. I want to dive into, and I want to unpack that challenge that you went through. How the question would be, how does a company add lots more people, but then experience all of those challenges that you said? Like more people doesn't mean necessarily faster moving ship, right? Or more capability. What actually led to the limiting factors that you experienced from a larger team?
Well, I think when you raise money, so this is probably mostly applicable to like software startups, because you don't typically see like agency businesses or service businesses raise outside investment, which, is a blessing in disguise. Sometimes you think like, oh man, a big, multi-million-dollar check would be great right now. But with that comes, other owners in the business and board and shareholders and all that kind of thing. And a real or perceived pressure to grow really quickly and to hit revenue targets really quickly. And, in those days, because we're sort of in a weird time right now where like the software SaaS market's gone a little bit soft compared to like 2021, all the COVID boosted, like everybody needs a tool and VC money is basically free. So we were in a time in that period where, the US market was great. The worldwide markets were really great. And anyway, that is usually the VC playbook is like, if you want to grow quickly, you build a sales team, you throw people at the problem and, you hope the revenue takes care of itself. But I would say in practice, there was a number of things that happened. But I think one of them was like, we definitely built too many layers within the organization too quickly. I think there's a way to scale headcount more efficiently, but I think what we ended up doing was we had too many managers that only had like one or two direct reports, and then we had like 5 layers in a still relatively small business. So from a get stuff done perspective, it creates a lot of communication gaps. The game of telephone becomes a real thing, a lot of misalignment. And then frankly, just not really having always the right people on the bus either, especially at the executive level. So having, people in these big C-level roles that really just didn't have the experience scaling a company. And and sort of, we're thinking from a individual contributor level, just trying to figure out how to be a manager, let alone be a, head of an entire department. So I think not having the right people on the bus and having too many of them made it almost impossible to get things done and to sort of move towards a vision.
Yeah. Too many cooks in the kitchen, not enough workers.
Yeah.
Tell me about. No, you go. Sorry.
No. I lost my thought.
Fine. I want to talk about the culture and what are some of the challenges you've experienced in culture. We touched on a little bit there, but as you've, in the first phase of business, were you intentional about building a team culture? And then how did that either slip, change, improve, evolve, and just lay out a bit of that journey of your own kind of awareness and experience of your role in building culture and what it looked like?
Yeah. It's a great topic. Culture is something that happens regardless, right? Culture will always be there. It's just a matter of whether or not it's going the direction you want it to go. So I think founders and CEOs and people who run companies have the ability to shape and guide and nurture their culture, but the culture will be there whether you like it or not. So it's always a matter of like, how intentional are you about it? And I think I did some things right. I also did some things wrong here. I think things that we did right were we generally hired like nice people and like talented, but also just really nice and fun to hang out with. And that helps in the early days, like people you want to spend time with. I also think it really helped shape our support culture because we were always like, our philosophy on day one was always over deliver on customer support, mainly because we didn't have much of a product at the time and we weren't confident in it. So it was like just white glove service for everyone, but also just like be human with people, like use gifts, joke around, obviously, when it's, not when they're pissed off, but like when the time is right, like joke around with them.
Yeah.
So I think things like that we did well, but I also think that sometimes that, the things that I wasn't as intentional about and I think hurt us in the long run, I think we've made a lot of gains there in recent years, is just like the idea of radical candor. So I don't know. I think that Australian and Canadian cultures are fairly similar in this way, which is like, we're generally pretty polite and nice to people. Compare with Americans. Sorry. And, that can hurt you in the long run, right? Because if anybody's read Kim Scott's great book, Radical Candor, it's like sometimes you've got this underperforming employee and they kind of suck at their job, but you kind of cover for them and they're so nice. They're like, sweet, I'm not going to say anything to them. And then eventually it gets so bad, you got to fire them, right? And we went, like a lot of our culture was so much about being nice. It wasn't as much about like, sometimes you've got to just say that sucks or you're sucking. How do we fix this? So I've been very intentional in the last like 3 to 4 years. And it's taken a long time to get there where we've made radical candor a core value in the company.
Nice.
And we have much more of a culture of, challenging people directly. And so those are the kind of things where a lot of the culture will come from the founder's core values, and the core values are not usually things that they've specifically chosen. It's just who they are, right? Like if you've got a founder with a certain personality type, they're going to hire people like them, and that's going to be the culture. The only way to actually guide and nurture the culture is to intentionally say there's a core value that we may not demonstrate yet, but it is important for these reasons. And so therefore we are going to model the behaviors and hire and fire based against these core values. Because if we don't have it, we're not going to be able to grow and hit our goals.
Yeah, I love that. That's such an important part of organizational culture, if there's becomes things you can't speak about or things that are not spoken about just because they're uncomfortable, like that's a common thing, right? If you can't master that and then put in place a culture where it's okay and that it's not damaging anyone's sensibilities, it's an understood and a value that's shared, then that's when it starts to work, right? What systems or policies or things, practical things, have you put in place to communicate that culture, and how does that message get around? And do you have a process for, like, for example, an underperforming employee?
Well, as far as values go, that was when we introduced new values. So we basically threw out our old values and introduced new ones. And that was like very much an all hands kind of, here's the deck, here's us walking through it, here's talking through it. Those kind of events, like, they only go so far because people can go, oh, cool, those are new values or whatever. But the real work is in the years it takes to actually get them embedded in the culture. So in terms of that, I mean, there's no replacement for modeling. Like, if you want a certain behavior in your company, then you as the CEO or the owner and your executive team need to be 100% aligned on, this is our core value, and we're demonstrating it day to day, week to week, in our behaviors and our words, the things that we're saying. So, for example, I shied away from having tough conversations for many years. I was just like, yeah, whatever, it'll work itself out in the long run. But by introducing radical candor, because we knew it was important and necessary, I had to then change. I had to now be the person who's going to say, hey, let's chat. I'm seeing an issue. This isn't right. So I still care about you. I want you to be happy, but at the same time, I'm not happy about this. Let's attack the behavior. Let's attack the work, not the person. So anyway, I had to actually change myself to change the culture. And that's where the real work is. Yeah. You can put it on a wall or in a Slack thread, but that only goes so far.
Yeah, it's forgotten pretty easily, right? And the culture is not what's said, it's as much as it's what's done. Staying on the subject of change and professional and personal development over your journey, it sounds like a long way to go from a small marketing agency, which I'm very familiar with, to a reasonable sized software company, and lay out the professional and personal development journey that you've had to go on to become the person you need to be to run Proposify and help it succeed.
And, if Proposify went out of business tomorrow, I wouldn't be happy about it. But I would be able to say that the last 10 years have been transformative for me as an individual, and that I could take whatever experience I gained from that, I could take that to the next venture and probably build a company faster and more successfully the next time. I don't think Proposify is going out of business. I'll just say that. But if it did, if it went away tomorrow, I would feel that it was worth it. And so I think that, the difference between this type of business and, say, running like a small 5-person marketing agency is that when I was running that business, I was much younger, just in terms of age. I was in my 20s. So inherently, like, just less experience in general, and usually having employees who were older than me, and sometimes, some cases, much older than me. I was extremely intimidated building a company like Proposify once we got from being just like a 3-person scrappy startup to now having like 10, 20, 30, 40 and upwards employees. Suddenly I had to now speak in front of a big group, and I had to have like an executive team and all that kind of stuff. And so, it's so essential I think no matter what kind of business you're in, that personal growth is just a part of your job. It's not like a thing you do on the side. It's like core to your job is getting coaching, getting, like reading books, going to like industry events or conferences where there's other people who are like sometimes 2, sometimes 10 steps ahead of you. Because if you don't level up, like your business will just stay the same. And so everything that I'm doing is like trying to figure out like, okay, Proposify at 1,000 employees. What does that look like? And become that person.
Yeah.
Because it won't like the company will only grow as much as the founder does.
Yeah. I love that. You mentioned radical candor. Has there been any other critical learnings, books or people that have added something to your journey and your awareness and understanding along the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's too many to count. I think. I think that there can be a danger sometimes in it. Like, so I'm saying on one hand, read books and develop yourself and get coaching. I'll take that with like it's a double-edged sword. Take it with a grain of salt as well, which is sometimes that can become a distraction, and sometimes you can too quickly jump on the idea of whatever the last thing you read is and be like, I read this great thing, I'm excited about it, and I want to bring this to the rest of the team. And so very paradoxically, it was a lot of like growing as a person and as a leader. There's a lot of also like, don't forget the stuff that made you successful in the first place. And I have done that. I've taken my eye off the ball. Things that I did that made us successful in the beginning, like always talk to your customers, get involved in the details of the work, like whatever your special power is, your superpower, whatever, if you're great at product, like don't stop doing product. If you're great at marketing, don't stop doing marketing. But as you grow, that becomes harder because now you've got teams and people and I don't want the CEO necessarily involved in what I'm doing. And people get really, people aren't as intimidated about the CEO title when you're a 3-person company. If you're 100 people or more, suddenly like the CEO coming in on your project and wanting to like review things is a bigger deal. So I shied away from that kind of stuff as we got a little bigger. I got too far removed from details and from like customer calls and those kind of things. And really that was a lot of, I think, what helped us in the beginning quite a bit. And so it's a weird, kind of, like I said, double-edged sword sort of thing of like, you want to start thinking beyond where you're at and you want to think at a higher level. And I think like certainly getting better at communicating vision and strategy and all that kind of stuff is really important, and just communicating in general. But also never losing what made you successful in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested. What is a day in the life of Kyle look like in today? And what kind of you mentioned, different CEOs and leaders will have different superpowers, right? Different skill sets that they really rock at. How much and how do you find the balance in that at the moment with not being too stuck in the details, but then not taking your eye off the ball in terms of vision and strategy? And what does your activities a day to day look like?
Looking at it more recently, within the last couple of years, I think I've realized something, which is when I was trying to think and act like bigger than we are, I was thinking, I was always confused by this question. Like, what does a CEO actually do, right? Because you hear people talk about vision and strategy and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, but in practice, what is that really? Is it like walking around? Is it like using a notebook? And I think where I've landed with this is that, vision, strategy, these are all very important things. And I think there's a lot of books that are really helpful when talking through like what these things are, and especially with strategy, because it's so often misunderstood. But I also think that the vision and the strategy also come from the tactics and the execution. Like the two are things that feed each other. And so by having conversations, by talking to people in the market, by, LinkedIn, posting on LinkedIn, commenting on LinkedIn, like all these activities are what are feeding the vision and the strategy. Because through the course of doing it, you're also understanding, okay, what's going on with the market right now? What are some categories that we might want to get into? What are our competitors saying? What are customer needs that, if your product stays the same, customers change, the market changes, and suddenly what you had was product market fit is no longer product market fit. So the act of doing is actually feeding the vision.
Yeah.
Right. So
good.
I think the actual, vision work comes from, you meet with your leaders at a quarterly offsite where you're digging into like the numbers and the metrics and where we're going. And you might start introducing new concepts or maybe new products or features we want to build, or maybe there's a company that we want to buy or whatever, right? That's kind of what strategy typically looks like, but it's never done in isolation. And if it's done in a vacuum, it's probably going to be a shitty strategy.
Yeah, totally. How involved are you I know there's some CEOs that have a really strong personal brand, and they just spend all of their time on the road pumping the product and the brand from a personal brand perspective, and getting involved in lots of speaking engagements and marketing partnerships and things like that. How engaged are you in that? Is that part of your role, or do you operate differently?
I used to think it was really important for the CEO to have a big personal brand. And I think if you go on LinkedIn right now, it's kind of all people are talking about for the most part is founder brands and all this stuff. But what was interesting was I just looked at the company Zapier, for instance.
Yeah.
And probably most people know what Zapier is who listen to this, but couldn't tell you who the CEO is.
True.
Right? So, and I looked at the CEO's LinkedIn profile and he had way more followers than I do, 50,000 or something like that. Not a massive amount, but more than me. And I thought, how many companies are there where people know the product and they know the company, but they don't really know the CEO? And there's more of those than there are companies that have famous personal brand CEOs. And so it kind of made me realize, like, if you just focus on making the best product, then it really doesn't matter if people know who the CEO is.
Yeah.
And that said, if you're running a professional services business or an agency business, I think it can be helpful to demonstrate, hey, we know what we're talking about. We're the experts in X, Y, Z. But again, even an agency that grows to 1,000 people, it really doesn't matter if people know who the founder and the CEO is. In fact, most of the big agencies out there, they're all dead. Ogilvy and Mather, Saatchi and Saatchi, like they have their name still, but the founders are no longer in existence. So I just think that if you identify a marketing channel that really works for you, then you should just milk that for all it's worth. So if SEO is your thing and that's what brings you all your customers, obviously experiment with other channels and don't become solely dependent on one. But at the same time, put 80% of your investment into that one channel. And so if speaking engagements and LinkedIn is that's what's bringing in the leads, do it. But if it's not and you have other channels, don't feel like you have to because I'm doing it wrong if I'm not building a founder brand.
Yeah, that's so good. And you speak about what was right for Proposify and what you believe is right for Proposify, and that will be completely different for lots of different businesses, right? That it might be that they leverage, and I love that element of what you're saying is that it's not a one size fits all, and many of the topics we talk about on this podcast. What we get to do as leaders and business people is to absorb and information and the journey of someone else and observe it and say what resonates with me, what element of that could I integrate into the way I do things, and what elements do I just observe and say that's great. But that's not for me.
Yeah. And this becomes so important to pick and choose for yourself because you're going to get all kinds of advice out there. That's why I said the same thing about books. I mean, we could sit here and list a ton of really helpful books, but at the end of the day, it's all what you pull out of that book. And it might be you read an entire book and there's just one core idea or one core tactic. and that suddenly becomes embedded in your brain, and now, okay, that's a part of who you are. But there's so many business books out there that, like, really it's probably one or two key ideas, and you, in some cases, you can just read the title and be like, oh, cool, I understand what the entire book is about because of the title.
Yeah, that's right.
So people
Like
can get a
Radical
little bit
Candor.
addicted to, like, oh, the reading books and taking courses can feel like work or can feel like development. And you're like, well, you might actually learn more from taking that one idea and just trying it 100 times in your business.
Love that. Learning through practice is the best learning, right? Like learning through doing. Yeah, love that. Now we would usually have really laid out and fleshed out what Proposify looks like and all of its key benefits already. But hey, we're here and we've had a good time so far. So let's go Proposify. What differentiates Proposify? What are some of the things? And I want you to be speaking to people who do not use online proposal software. And may not understand the value and the benefits and the features of being able to use online proposal software. Lay out a few of the really cool parts of Proposify as it is now.
Well, I think that proposals are fairly universal in that most businesses send them in some form or another. They might be contracts or agreements or whatnot. For a lot of people, the benefit really comes down to how competitive is the industry that you're playing in. Because I'll hear some people say, like, oh, well, people are like, clients that come to me are pre-qualified. They just want to know what the number is. They don't need anything fancy. And I'm like, don't use us then. Like, you don't have to use proposal software. But for a lot of businesses, their proposal is being put up against 2 others or 5 others or 10 others. And so it's really about, like, what's going to help you stand out and win that business. And so I think the benefit of online proposal software is that, number one, you get a more impressive proposal to your buyer so that they look at you like, oh, they have their shit together. Like, the other guy sent me this, like, crappy PDF that, is like small text and it's really hard to see and the images are blurred, whatever. Like, it just makes you look more polished and more professional. Yeah. And I think that's the primary benefit. But then I think the other piece is internal. So, like, if it's just one person, like you said, when you were putting it together in InDesign's really complex software that, takes time to learn. And that's what we used to do for our proposals when I ran an agency. But it was more like when I try to get my business partner to use it, who's really not a designer, he would mess it all up. He would mess up the images and all the layout and the fonts were wrong. Yeah. And that was what triggered the idea for Proposify. So I think the benefit of proposal software really scales with the company, because when you've got a sales team now and they need to send out proposals quickly, get them in the hands of buyers, you want to make sure that they look right, that the brand is on point, that it's using the right content, the right pricing, and it's like, data is getting synced to the CRM and pulled into the document. So, like, they're not sending out Acme Co. or insert client name. Like, it's actually got the right client name. That's really the benefit of it.
Yeah. There's a couple of huge things in there. The one is from the, I'll take Hebron Films as an example. Our customer, our client, the fact that it's really simple and easy for them to get the information and the message that I'm trying to deliver to them, the barrier to entry on, like, opening the proposal, right? We're talking about really basic things. Opening the proposal, super simple. They click on the link that says open my proposal that I've linked to my proposal. And say they want, I've had this recently, a client's come back a couple of times and said, hey, could you actually change a couple of things? I can get those changes made and back to them in an instant, because I make the change on Proposify, but I don't have to resend it. They've already got the link and it's live, right? So I don't have to resend that proposal again. And all of these kind of elements, it starts building a picture and a story in your client's mind, or your potential client's mind, of wow, these guys are slick. Like, they are making it easy for me to say yes to this proposal. And honestly, I've said this multiple times in different groups and a bit of business coaching that I do, but the proposal, if you literally do nothing else but use a tool like Proposify, in certain markets, you will be the only one. Sometimes, and I find this a lot, just using Proposify, and I do a team up with Loom, and I run through the proposal on a recorded video so that my client can see the proposal and see my face. It brings my personality across, and the whole thing, it builds this ecosystem of that the client goes, whoa, that was fun. It was easy. This thing looks great. And the things that I'm comparing it against, this guy over here sent me a black and white PDF that I had to get a separate email for to sign, and it didn't work. So there's a lot of things on the client usability side that already make you stand out without even talking about the words on the page, right? Which are incredibly important. But the functionality of the tool is really something that can often make you stand out, right?
That's awesome. Well,
really,
thanks for
really
sharing
good.
that. And also,
no
I think getting it to them quickly kind of feels like it's underappreciated maybe by people. Like, you will close deals just by getting them the proposal faster. Because a lot of agencies will say right on their website, on the contact form, expect 2 weeks for a proposal.
Oh.
And it's just like I had a customer. This was a few years ago, but he told me like that his agency beat VaynerMedia, Gary Vaynerchuk's agency. He beat them at a proposal because basically they were going to take 2 weeks, and the prospect, they sent it to them in Proposify in 20 minutes, and they're like, oh well, we'll just go with you guys. So like
because it's there,
and that's so often how much like we'll buy anything if we can just get it faster, right? People really forget this idea of like, when somebody reaches out to you and talks to you about buying your services, like they're interested now. If 2 weeks goes by, they'll get distracted and move on to something else. Yep,
that's so true. Great point. All right, so tell me, what are we've talked about some of the benefits and the key features of Proposify, and one of my favorite is your support team, but we could talk about that as well. But I want to know, what are some of the things that you're working on right now to make Proposify better?
Yeah. So we've been about almost coming up on 3 years in development of Proposify 3, which is completely redesigned, reimagined version of Proposify. Really what we're trying to address, this doesn't sound sexy at all, but I think it will for our customers, is like, we're basically just trying to get the ease of use right. So we're basically, a lot of people will say, I love the output of Proposify. I love the visual impact it has for my buyers, but like, man, editing text is really clunky and painful, and there's all these bugs that happen and that kind of thing. So that's what we're basically trying to nail with this new version, is like, make sure copy paste works really well. Make sure that like the editor's really stable and like things snap together and I don't have to do as much, finessing. So that's kind of like, that's what we're really focused on for 3. And while we're doing it, we're introducing new features, like the new pricing tables are very flexible. You can add columns, you can change the size. The insights are really cool. So like instead of just getting broad metrics on like your document was opened and people spent this much time in it, is like a person by person breakdown with a timeline of like how many times they opened it. So there's a lot of cool like little features that's what we're focused on today, and getting it like in shape to be able to roll out to our customer base this year. But then as we're, kind of things are a little bit further down the time horizon, we're actually looking to expand into a couple of different spaces. So being able to have like add-on features that not necessarily everybody needs, but if you need it, you can have it all together. You don't need to use 5 different tools. It's like one of them is like being able to introduce deal rooms or digital sales rooms, so that you can have like kind of a hub for your buyer in case there's multiple documents that need to be introduced throughout the sales process. Looking at like CPQ or like configure price quotes, of being able to hold all your pricing. We have a fee library in Proposify now, but it's pretty basic. And so we're looking to grow that. So if you have, thousands of products or SKUs, you can get those into proposals really quickly. And then like contract functionality. So like redlining and things like that. So those are kind of like the big things that we're looking to build upon 3.0 when it comes out.
I love that. I'm really excited about that. And one of the reasons that I love your support team so much is, and they've done a lot of good things, is that the Proposify has been a little bit buggy, right? And so, but the coolest thing, and it's actually what made me fall in love with Proposify, is that some companies that, the product doesn't work like the user thought it would or should, and it's actually a common thing in Australia, given the time zone difference for a lot of areas of the States and even Europe. But the getting support is just a nightmare, and you often just don't get the answer, or you don't get the help you need, or it's lost in translation. It's like, come on, I need this to work. And proposals, they're as you would know, right? Like they're a high stakes thing, right? You're often trying to get it done as fast as possible. You really want to get the job. And a lot is hinging on the tool working to get that done. And so when I've run into challenges before, I think the first time it was like I was pulling my hair out. I was stressed because of a time, right? And something wasn't working the way I wanted it to. And so I reached out to the support team. I reckon it was Andre that got back to me, and it was phenomenal. Like, it was like he was inside my brain. He was empathetic at the start, and confirmed that he understood what the problem was. I think he, in that instance, even went in and helped actually change what needed to be changed, and then helped me understand how I could avoid that in the future. And I ended up having like a laugh on the other end of his final email. And that whole process, honestly, it like blew me away. I was like, what just happened? I went from stressed and upset and almost raging at this thing to just falling in love with this company. Like, well, how has this happened? Just through a support request, right? I want to know how have you enabled that? And that's pretty unique from a software company perspective. How have you enabled that kind of service, and what things have you put in place that mean that that happens?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that you had the experience that you did with Andre or whoever it was in the support team. I'm definitely going to share that with them. And I will say that the CS team has saved our own ass on multiple occasions by, really just kind of being the duct tape to sometimes keep product gaps together. Because like you said, sometimes they can go in, I know the little hack or the workaround to make that thing work. So that is the big thing with Proposify 3, is that we're looking to like make sure that they can spend their time on other things rather than like figuring out the hacky workarounds. Yeah. But with that said, how do we build the support culture? I think, like I mentioned at the outset, that, it was always important from day one to be very like customer centric, and everybody talks to customers. We actually for a long time had a policy that anybody who joins in any department, even if they're in like finance or engineering or whatever, is that they always do a support day. So we basically had this everyone does support policy. So if you're in like marketing and your support day is like one day out of the month, then you literally would go and sit with the support team and answer tickets all day with them. And usually they needed a lot of help from other team members to be like, I don't know what to say. But we always felt that was an important part of making sure that everybody in the company had a close touch point with not only the customer, but the product as well. And then I think that, the whole idea of like empathize with people, solve their problem, dig in, make them laugh when it's appropriate, all that kind of stuff was definitely like standard operating procedure since day one. And then, at a certain point, I stopped doing support and had support people, and then eventually like somebody leading it who was way better than me. They like to poke fun at me because I think I had a really rude customer that I told to like, fuck off and stop using the product once. And, they hold it against me and they say like, oh yeah, that's why we don't let Kyle near the customers anymore.
This one-time thing.
I think it was one time, maybe twice. Anyway, they acted like it was all the time.
Right.
So anyway, they said, yeah, you're not allowed to do support anymore. But really, like Mel Gunn, our director of customer success, she's been with the company since, I want to say like 2017, 2016. So quite a long time from being a support rep to now running the entire department. And so she's very intentional, and as are many of the people in that department, a lot of longtime people, just very much about like maintaining high level like support ratings. So it is very much critical. Like the concept of automating support with AI or like going overseas to like a call center sort of thing, like that would significantly change, I think, the value of what we offer our customers.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that would apply to many businesses, even ones that aren't software businesses. The idea of hospitality, I'm going to call out another book that I love, Unreasonable Hospitality. It is what you do, right? It is the concept that your customers and the value for your customers being that they're important enough that we will spend an unreasonable or an amount of energy on ensuring their success and their happiness and their joy with the product, because if we don't do that, then it's not going to go well for the company, right? One of the most important things is happy customers, because we know like the lifetime value of the customer goes up phenomenally. They talk about it more with people that they're working with or colleagues or friends. Everything improves when the customer's experience is great. And yeah, few companies, few industries is it more important than a software company, but it's applicable across all areas. Now, as we round this out, like I want to get your summary on a couple of key learnings or key principles that you hold pretty close to your philosophy of success, and what have you learned over the years that you could pass on as wisdom for running a successful company? What are some tips from Kyle?
I think you said it really well. What you just said about when you create a great experience for customers, that solves a lot of your growth problems. Because word of mouth is the most powerful marketing channel, because of, lifetime value of the customer, renewals, all those things. That's really like, if you're in a type of business where you're continually churning out customers and continually having to market really hard and sell to get new customers, it's not a scalable business. And so, I think the reason why Amazon is as big and successful as it is, you can say a lot of negative things about Bezos and Amazon and all this kind of stuff, but like, what do they do better than anyone else is they obsess over the customer experience. So like, how can we make it faster and easier? How can we like just get the product to their door tomorrow, and like you can send it back and we don't ask any questions. Like they just focus obsessively on customer value. And I think if you do that, like, revenue is just a byproduct of the value you create. So if you create something really valuable for customers, the revenue is sort of comes out the other end. So, I mean, the best way to get revenue is to almost like not focus on revenue. And that's like a weird way to think about it. But you're just like, how can I deliver so much value that it would be unreasonable that like people wouldn't pay us a lot of money for it? And then I think at that point, it's just about, at that point, marketing and sales become fuel that you throw in the fire, right?
Yeah.
And if you can get really good at both, and this is applicable whether you're software or an agency or whatever kind of business, is like, if you have a world-class product or service and then a world-class go-to-market, you can't really be stopped.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And that reminds me of another thing you mentioned earlier in the episode is the need to be understanding the market changes and ensure that experience and that product is keeping up with demand, and it's keeping up with how people's expectations change or needs change, or other tools are introduced. So being as nimble as possible, but is important, right, to be able to deliver that experience.
Well, it's funny because I had an old friend who's a photographer, was taking my headshot many years ago, and she was like, "Oh, how's Proposify going?" "Good." She's like, "How big are you?" And I told her, and she was like, "What? Like, how many developers is that?" And I told her the number, and she was like, "But isn't the product done? Like, why do you have so many developers still?" And people sometimes wonder that. Why does Facebook have 10,000 developers or whatever it is? And it's like, because literally software degrades over time. Like, it doesn't just stay good. It's why like apps on your phone just stop working after a while. Like, as hardware changes, software literally just like degrades from a performance level. But then the market needs change, right? If we were all still using Facebook from 15, 20 years ago, what was like really amazing then would be just awful now. And so you just constantly have to be evolving. So if you staying the same is going backwards. I was like in business to like riding a bike up a hill, which is like, there's no such thing as staying still, because if you stay still, you'll fall back.
That's good.
You have to be pedaling forward to be able to keep going. That's why like you can't really have a business that does the same in revenue every year. People are like, I don't want to grow. I just want to stay at 2 million in revenue, and I don't want to get too big. That's what a lot of like very inexperienced entrepreneurs will say. Like, I don't want to grow too big because it's hard enough managing 3 employees. I couldn't imagine managing 6. And it's just like, staying the same is going backwards. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a universal truth. Mate, we're at the end of our episode now, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing, being open, telling us and giving us some insight into a software company. I think you're the first primarily software business we've had on the podcast. First international, so you're Mr. First in multiple areas. But I just want to thank you for what you've contributed, and I've had a lot of fun diving into Proposify and your story.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun as well, Caleb. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you really enjoyed listening, why don't you drop a comment in the comments below? Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you get updates on when all of the next ones come out. That really helps grow this little community of people that are diving into regional business and celebrating and learning more from it. So really appreciate your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.